So, my first question is, how are you feeling? How are you doing?
Well, we're in a lot of trouble in the United States and around the world. And I feel like this is my life work and my purpose. And so I'm very engaged and therefore very stressed out and worried about things, but I'm committed to doing everything I can to make things better.
I would like to ask you, you dedicated all your life to researching cults and helping people and families out of cults. How can you I know a lot of people is probably asking you about it, but can you count how many people and families did you help already? I know this is a funny questions, but do you ever count?
No, most of the people I could say I've helped have seen me on television or heard me interviewed or read Combating Cult Mind Control. I've helped hundreds of thousands of people over, well, 35 years since the book first came out. I've since updated it. We even have a Spanish edition now. But I've written other books like Freedom of Mind and The Cult of Trump, of course, for Simon and Schuster. But since I began the computer age, I started to track people that contacted me and such. And it's many thousands of people that I've.
Do
Okay.
people have a tendency to turn towards cults in specific times? Is there like a trait, let's say before a war, or is there like a zeitgeist
Well, so
issue?
we know that human beings have always had a tribal impulse and we are social beings, we're emotional beings. We have five senses that connect us to other people. So for me, because I've been researching this for 50 years since my own deprogramming from a right-wing fascist cult called the Moonies. I look at cults from ethical cults to destructive authoritarian cults, and I
Mhm.
say there's no problem for me with people being involved with tightly knit groups where people are passionate and they spend a lot of time and energy and money and even have people they look up to lead them. But the issue is informed consent, respect for people's conscience, the ability to read whatever you want to read, talk to whoever you want to talk to, and free to leave or go somewhere else if you don't like it anymore. It's not suiting your fulfilling you, suiting your purposes, or you find something better. Authoritarian mind control cults, which is the focus of my work, is actually a dissociative disorder. I'm speaking as a
Mhm.
mental health professional. And the way I like to explain brainwashing and mind control is in terms of my own experience. I was Steve Hassan, who liked to write poetry, read books, play basketball, liked girls. At 19, when I got recruited, I was dumped by my girlfriend, and that gets to your question that there was
Mhm.
some situational vulnerability where I was more receptive to women flirting with me, and
Mhm.
they turned out to be lying, and they turned out to be Mooney recruiters. And so the real Steve got programmed with the Mooney Steve. And I was told to be a small Sun Myung Moon and think like him and walk like him and talk like him and be a leader of the world for God. And I want to say that in 1974, when I first got involved with the group, I was immediately selected as a leader, even though I had no power, but I was a 6 foot tall white American who was, fairly intelligent. I got to be in the room with Sun Myung Moon, and he said, "We're going to infiltrate the U.S. government. God hates democracy. God wants a theocracy." And eventually, he even said, "When we take power in America, we'll amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who violate our rules." And so, my mindset as a cult member was to think that the real me was evil and satanic and demonic. And so these mind control techniques kept me down. But the real me was still in there. And when I had my van crash due to sleep deprivation and 5 days of voluntary deprogramming, and I experienced the deprogramming not because I had any doubts, but I wanted to prove to my family I wasn't in a cult and I wasn't brainwashed. And so it was a challenge. But when I learned about Chinese communist brainwashing techniques from Robert J. Lifton's 1961 book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, I started feeling confused because the Moonies thought we're doing God's will, and Chinese communists are Satan because they're atheists. But the Moonies were doing the same brainwashing techniques as the Chinese. So that started the dissonance between my real self and my cult self. And when I woke up, I realized Moon was a liar, and if he was a liar, then he couldn't be a man of God. He couldn't be the Messiah. And then I thought, that means he's not trustworthy. So what am I doing in this group? And so it was like a bubble bursting. And I felt like I had been psychologically and spiritually raped, frankly, like my mind
Oh
had
my
been
God.
taken over.
Yeah.
Did the process last? The deprogramming?
Well, so it was in two phases. The first phase was me waking up as I was driving into the back of a big truck at 80 miles an hour and then being pried out of the wreckage and rescued. 2 weeks in the hospital away from the group. So I didn't, in the group, I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, but in the hospital, I was sleeping all day and all night pretty
So
much.
your brain had time to recover.
Yes, very
That's
much so. This is one of the main techniques or one of the main patterns that I teach. I actually did a TED talk. How can I know if I've been brainwashed? And I say the first step is to take a time out from the group. And in this case, get off your phone, stop. Right. So people need to if you're constantly being barraged by one point of view, you
Mhm.
can't think from other perspectives. So take a time out. And in that TED talk, I talk about learning about Chinese communist brainwashing and my bite model of authoritarian control, which is what I did my doctoral dissertation on, that looks at behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And I have a list of criteria like controlling sleep, changing clothing, changing food, changing names. So people can self-diagnose by going through the list and checking off how many of these elements of control of behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions your particular involvement has. And ultimately people can then decide whether they want to be in a group from informed consent.
Dr. Hassan, I got another question. You just mentioned your book, A Cult of Trump, which became bestseller and very popular in the United States. When exactly was the time then you realized that everything what you see around the propaganda, around Trump, around people falling down the rabbit holes and cherishing him like the second Messiah, when was the moment that you realized, oh my God, this is another form of cult, just digital propaganda created?
I was approached by my book agent in 2018, so Trump was already in power.
Hmm.
He was voted in 2 years previously, but I should say I'm from Queens, New York. I grew up 1 mile from Donald Trump's childhood home, so I've known Donald Trump as a malignant narcissist my whole career. So, and I know that that is the profile that Eric Fromm came up with studying Adolf Hitler. And it turns out that that is the profile for all destructive cult leaders. And in chapter 3 of my book, I compare Trump with Jim Jones, my former cult leader, Sun Myung Moon, and Hubbard of Scientology. But when my agent said, I want you to write The Cult of Trump, my first reaction was, no, I'm not political. I'm a therapist. And then I said, it's going to alienate all the people who follow Trump if I have a book by this title. And he argued, they're not going to read your book anyway. You should write a book for the rest of us to understand this. But at the time when I said yes to this, all I knew was he had the profile of a cult leader. What I came to learn is that there are actual cults as puppet masters, including Russia, of Donald Trump, telling him what to say and do for their own purposes. And there are actual cults that bring their members to believe in Trump, many of which are religious cults. And the biggest population of these cults is called New Apostolic Reformation churches. And the media has mischaracterized them as Christian evangelicals, but Christian evangelicals refute New Apostolic Reformation megachurches and these leaders because they're basically run by people who say, I'm a prophet or I'm an apostle. I speak directly to God. And God told me Trump, he wants God told me that Trump should be president and that he won the 2020 election. And all these members, many millions, are brainwashed to follow the prophet. Otherwise, they're told they have a demon in them and they need exorcism.
This is
And so
horrible.
this is a co-option of religion for political purposes and for agendas of the fossil fuel companies, for the tech billionaires who want to have their own agenda to control the world. And so what we're seeing now is just massive corruption, massive greed, and we need to keep coming back to basic human rights, rule of law, separation of church and state, all the things that have helped the human species do so well is trust, that we
Yeah,
work together to solve
absolutely.
common problems.
Yeah.
But when it comes, for example, to climate warming and climate crisis, what I've learned is that the fossil fuel companies have learned from the big tobacco
Mhm.
saying, oh, there's no evidence that smoking causes cancer, even though they knew that it did, because they wanted to make money. And the fossil fuel companies use the Moonies Washington Times newspaper to do climate science denial, to say, well, it's not proved that humans are warming the planet. We need more research. So they've been doing that for decades through the
Wow,
Moonies
that's
Washington
interesting.
Times.
So you are saying that they are using the brainwashed people to perpetrate the denial propaganda and help elected people who
Exactly.
my God. So it's like cults are a political tool,
Exactly.
influence tool.
Exactly. But understand something, people's votes can be altered if they are emotionally aroused with fear against the other. That's one of the most primal things. And we know from prior elections, why does each party raise so much money? It's to back then it was to get television ads. Since we've entered the digital age, the manipulations have gotten much more sophisticated, and in the United States based on people's personal data that was hacked through Facebook and through all of the other social media hacks. And so now we have supercomputers that are able to do very customized influence
Brainwashing.
campaigns. Yeah, and what I want to say also, Russia is the biggest bad actor in my research on this. That they were upset that the U.S. took down the Soviet Union. And when Putin took power and he got his KGB cronies to become oligarchs, they kept doing active measures on the United States to buy off Congress people and senators, to change laws, to fund think tanks, and collaborated with bad actors who are Americans to do this because they want to destroy America's dominance as a world superpower, because America has the means to stop Russia from invading
Absolutely. Yeah.
Europe. But in the co-option of Donald Trump, which From my research, he was recruited as an asset in the 1980s. His
Yeah.
first trip to Moscow, when he returned to the US, he took out 3 full-page ads against NATO. And before he went to Moscow, he had no opinion about NATO, but when he came back, he was
Suddenly,
parroting Kremlin talking points.
you
What do
know,
you think is his relationship with Russia as to
I think
does
he
he
was
really like them
recruited
or
as an
yeah.
asset. I think that they've been using his properties for money laundering.
Mhm.
They've bailed him out of many failed bankrupt businesses. And here's a link with the Christian dominionists, the New Apostolic Reformation and dominionists. Mark Burnett, his wife and he are involved with the Christian-esque culty group, and they made Donald Trump's image through the show
yeah,
The
like this.
Apprentice into a great businessman, and he was never a good businessman. He
Yeah,
was
I
a
never
utter
knew.
failure as a businessman, but that was part of the grooming of the American people to believe that he was a success.
Yeah, Mark Burnett was a famous TV producer, and he was also a Putin admirer, if I may remember well.
That's new to me, but I'm not surprised. I know about this stuff because I became a whistleblower for a congressional subcommittee investigation when I first got out of the Moonies into the Korean CIA's infiltration into the United States. And the Moonies were used for this purpose. And it turns out the CIA helped to set up the South Korean CIA. And we're using the Moonies as a disinformation source, but also to set up gun factories in South Korea to supply to third countries and subvert
This is
Congress.
absolutely unknown story, this part of how the Moonies got created. So no one really, except of who reads your articles,
Yeah, I
it's
wrote about it in Combating Cult Mind Control, and I talked about this. And of course, I have a website, freedomofmind.com, and I'm a single citizen. I don't have any money backing. I'm just funding my own activism and doing podcasts and doing live streams when I can and writing articles to warn people. But the good news for me is that we're not like the Russians who were used to the czars. Americans pretty much are spoiled with free speech and freedom of assembly and having a justice system that supports the minority view and was trying to give women's rights, equal rights and gay rights, etc. But the bad actors are pushing back and want to turn back the clock and go to fascism because if they can make people afraid enough, people will self-censor and people won't come out and vote or protest. All of us who understand fascism and understand brainwashing and mind control, we know the only solution is resistance
yeah.
and not kowtowing to these evil people.
Natalie is an American, I'm Czech, so we have different cultural roots. And she always keeps telling me, you have no idea how angry and violent can American become when they realize someone is stealing their freedom. It didn't come yet, but you have no idea. And actually, we Czechs are different. We are more calm and solving everything with compromise. And also, we spent 60 years under communist rule, so we have a different
Right.
DNA.
But the cults have been wanting civil war. They've been stoking left wing to make them more extreme on left, to make the right more
Mhm.
extreme, to polarize and such. They want stockpiles of rifles. And the Moonies were going around with Moon's son, Sean Moon, who has a crown of golden AR-15 bullets and calls himself king. He lives in Pennsylvania, and his brother Justin has an arms factory. And I don't know if you heard the story that Trump said, "My sons want to create an Amazon for guns so people can get guns easily." And so I did a whole thing about how the son is in bed with the Moonies and their gun factory. But they were going around the country with Michael Flynn, who is a known Russian actor, doing Rod of Iron freedom festivals. And the Moonies operate 2 training facilities in Tennessee and near Waco, Texas, to train people for Civil War. So they're wanting there to be mass protests, and the studies are pretty conclusive that when people are hungry, they're going to get violent. If they can't feed their family, they're going to riot, and that's what Trump wants. He wants to declare martial law so there won't be any free and fair elections or any elections at all. He's trying to already start blaming China for why there can't be elections for the midterms, because people are turning on the Republicans, and he's going to lose. He could lose the House and the Senate, which is what I'm hoping will happen.
Yeah. Do you think the resistance is big enough or adequate? Because we see it as not enough. We're surprised. This is the feeling that Europeans have, that they're surprised that the pushback is not big enough. Does that have an explanation? How do you see that?
I think the Democratic Party has been terrible. They don't have strategy. I mean, now I'm starting to hear Democratic leaders talk about cults. Chris Murphy has a new book out, and he's talking about cults. Doesn't mention my book or talk about that, but there's more and more talk about it. But they don't have strategy, and they don't have real boots on the ground organization, like what happened in Hungary and how people voted Orban out. Was they had thousands of volunteers going and registering voters. Half of the United States doesn't vote. And if the Democrats were really organized and they weren't bought off by the fossil fuel industry or the big tech or whatever their motivation is, if we really got it together, there'd be overwhelming opposition. And that's what I'm trying to do, and why I keep speaking out, and why I accept almost every invitation to speak, because maybe someone with the funds and somebody with the connections, the network to make this a reality happen will hear me and say, well, so what should we do, Steve?
Yeah, 100%. Coming to your question, what should we do, Steve? In Czech Republic, we have right now, as a prime minister, an oligarch who tells about himself, I'm a Trumpist, and he was in bed with Orban, and he got the same method used throughout the election. So like 1/3 of the Czech population actively believes we are not believers in God, so we don't believe, Czech people don't believe he's a Messiah, but there is a cult of personality as hell. Like women, especially 50 plus in the rural areas, they love him so much they would forgive him, even as Trump says, even if I would kill somebody on the Fifth Avenue, they will still vote for me. This is exactly the situation we have right now in Czech Republic.
So I don't know about the Czech people, but in the United States, with Me Too movement and all of the Epstein survivors who've spoken out, with the details that are coming out about this global trafficking conspiracy, so many Americans voted for Trump because he said he was going to clean up the swamp, and he convinced a lot of these people that the Democrats were involved with the trafficking and not him. But now that it's obvious that he is at the center of this and has shut down even the court's order to share all of the details, especially women in the United States are angry as hell. And it's affecting even women in these Christian cults, because they don't want their daughters to be raped by traffickers and by politicians because, of their power or something. And so there's a lot I think a lot of GOP women who, can privately go into the voting booth, say they're voting for Trump and put up their third finger and say, fuck
Yeah.
you, Trump.
No, I don't. Yeah,
Well, they
that
may
would
not
be
curse if they're religious, but so what can we do with people who love Trump in the Czech Republic? The way the Republicans have done it characteristically is people like Frank Luntz organizes focus groups of people and really
trying
investigates
going
the
beneath.
underlying motivations and to identify the key areas where messaging should be targeted. And I'm not sure what would work with
Yeah, absolutely. We are absolutely different culture. Just the method was the same. He promised
Mm,
to end the corruption and
mm.
the organized crime. Now it turns out he is the
He
most
is.
corrupt politician we ever had. Like same story, just without the Messiah thing.
so for me it's really about how to transmit, motivate, engage people in real life. Too many young people and older people are on their phones and they're feeling lonely and isolated, and the messaging is so upsetting that it makes you want to give up and just watch movies or play video games.
The
Mm.
loneliness, that's the word.
I have a
People are
big
alone.
question. I'm sorry.
No, I was
Yeah.
just going to say the Pope just came out with a big statement saying we need human beings and we should not be delegating all of our decisions and our thinking processes to computers. And that's a very positive thing. If there are Catholic people, maybe the Catholic priests in the Czech Republic could be more active, magnifying the Pope, because this is the first American Pope also.
Yeah.
That might be worth exploring. The bottom line is that we're all finite beings, so we have a limited amount of time and energy and money. And so who has the money? There are people with a lot of wealth who are still in another period in their
Universe.
mind where they're thinking, I'll make all this money and give it to my children, but there may not be a planet to give to their children if they don't take some of that money and invest it in fighting this corruption and this fascism.
And this destruction as general. So everything under these people like Trump and our oligarch Babiš and Orban and everything seems to get broken. The state gets broken, the money, the banking system, the entire international trade gets broken.
Again, it's an issue of a lot of people in the United States still don't know about the Russia connection
Mm.
with Trump. They don't know about the Council for National Policy, the right-wing billionaire think tank that's been around for 40 plus years. I mean, they're the ones, and Nan Nelson wrote the book on them. It's called Shadow Network. They put the Mooney's first editor in place for the Washington Times to do the fossil fuel climate science denial, the Council for National Policy. I have a podcast out that came out this morning with a former 37-year Mormon bishop. And the Mormons are an authoritarian cult, and they're overrepresented in America's intelligence and law enforcement community. And people don't understand. And I literally asked Ian and Jim Bennett, so FBI, CIA, Homeland Security, they all swear an oath to the Constitution. But if they're confronted with an order from the Mormon Church versus what their obligation is to the Constitution, which one do you think the operative will follow? And they didn't hesitate. They said, of course, the prophet. So it's like, so we have an authoritarian cult from Utah that has all this preponderance of law enforcement people in a cult. Because I've been asked by individuals like the two former FBI negotiators with Waco, who I met years after it went up in flames. They read my books. So they said, we wish we knew about you, Steve, when we were with David Koresh. And I said, I was trying through my congressman. I even went on TV saying you're going about it completely the wrong way. And one of them said, you should come to Quantico and train us. And I said, okay, let me know. And a few months later, he said, they're not interested in outsiders, Steve. And I went, oh. And I said, who'd you ask? Oh, my former boss. He's a Mormon. I said, oh, that explains it.
Wow.
So it's like, let's remember religion should be about love, should be about helping the poor, helping the immigrant, helping, society lift people up. It should not be about greed and power and politics. And let's uplift legitimate spiritual beliefs and people who are speaking about values. That's why I'm so excited, even though I'm Jewish, about the Pope. He's like speaking out against Trump without saying, I don't like Trump, but he's speaking
Yeah,
values.
that's obvious. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people who got into the New Apostolic Reformation because they were upset with the Catholic priest pedophile scandal and their conspiracy to cover it up. And this Pope is trying to make amends. He even apologized for the church's role in slavery.
Yeah.
So people are starting to come back to the Catholic Church, which to me, 1.8 billion people or whatever it is a significant group if they are going to follow the morality lessons that the Pope is sharing. And I see no reason why they wouldn't. So that gives me hope. But I'm also I'm wanting more religious people to speak out against these cults. Say this is not right. We have James Tallarico running
In
in
Texas, right?
Texas, and people like his message because he's like, Jesus helped the poor. He
Yeah.
wasn't anti-woman. He, let's go back to values. And it's resonating even in one of the reddest states, aside from Utah, in America.
Yeah.
So, there's reason to still be hopeful and engaged and not give in to the doomsdayers. The doomsdayers want
Absolutely.
people to give up. And so I
Absolutely.
refuse to be a doomsdayer sayer.
I sometimes was when I was trying to educate the Czech people about the algorithmic propaganda and the situation in the US, but we have to have some hope. And the spiritual leaders, newly appearing spiritual leaders and political leaders, that's what we need. And also network, because it's on us. There is no Democratic Party or not our opposition in the Czech Republic. The powers that be are not the solution. We
Right.
are.
And the Democratic Party needs a makeover big time, and that's why a lot of people are leaving the Democratic Party to be independents. They'll vote against Trump. They don't like the Democratic Party, but they like Trump much worse. So I think they'll vote against Trump, but we need new leadership. But again, we need to have an understanding how
Yes.
the mind can get hacked and what we can say and do to help people wake up from it. And I'll say briefly, as a former Moonie, whenever anyone said you're brainwashed, Steve, or you're in a cult, it made me stronger in the Moonies. I felt persecuted. It didn't make me doubt at all. It reinforced my commitment to the cult.
That's
When people are warm and friendly and ask questions, and I thought as a Moonie I could recruit them, and they would ask me questions that would make me think. That's the strategy that will help people get out and start reality testing. And so what I've been saying for 10 years is, you blocked your uncle, your best friend became MAGA. Say hello. I miss you. I want you back in my life. And if you called them names and they're angry at you, apologize and just say, "Can we go forward? We have so much shared history together. You're important to me." And just ask warm, open-ended questions. What do you think about the Iran war? What do you think about the price of gasoline? What do what do you think about what Trump said? He doesn't care what people think.
Mhm.
Just and listen and ask follow-up questions. Tell me more. Tell me more. And
That's why the
ultimately, if you really were close with the person, you can say, "I'm really interested in having a reciprocity with you. I'd like you to share something, in the media that you find very valuable and influential for your thinking. Share it with me and let's, watch it together or read it together and we'll discuss it. And then I'll take my turn and I'll share something that's important to me and we'll go back and forth because all that matters is figuring out what's true and what's real."
I have this big question that I keep asking myself because I go through Epstein files a lot. And just periodically, I ask myself, why is everything so sexualized today? Is that like, why is there so much pedophilia? Was it always like this and we didn't see it? Or for somebody who has no idea about this subject, it just looks absurd. Does America have like a general problem with this issue? Or I don't even know how to say this.
So I think that what one needs to understand is that trafficking is sex trafficking and labor trafficking. But they're both rooted in slavery. That's the root of why it's a crime, is that people are not free. They don't have choices, etc. So my work has been used by sex and labor traffickers. Regarding how big has the problem been, I think there's always been a problem. I can tell you that most cult leaders were in a cult before. They weren't born and said, "I want to grow up and become a cult leader." No, they were in an authoritarian family with a father, maybe, or the mother was a narcissist and was not teaching them healthy love and respect and given proper developmental things. We know that corporal punishment is a traumatic thing for children. It's illegal in most civilized countries, but not the United States. And most of the people in these cults were corporally punished. So we know features of this. But what I want to say is that the media has had a very negative effect. If you're in the big tobacco, they were getting people to dress up like doctors on TV to smoke and talk about how relaxed they are, and paying movie producers to have their actors smoking cigarettes. So, and we're seeing so much violence in our media and so much sexualized stuff in our media. I think that it becomes normalized. I think that's a piece of it. But I'm told the biggest internet business is pornography. It's
yeah.
bigger than almost everything else. And so why? What is it about pornography? And it really is capitalizing on making people addicted
Mhm.
to a certain
Mhm.
hormones and cortisol and adrenaline, etc. And frankly, orgasms feel good. But if you are grooming young people to look at, women with plastic surgery who are not normal, have normal bodies, and they associate sexual activity with that, they're not going to be with a real person. They'll never be. They won't have
No
the
chance.
skills, and they won't have the attraction to understand what true relationships are about and true healthy stuff. I'm seeing a push towards androids, having
Yeah,
having the
Elon
perfect
Musk. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
chatbots, and have the perfect person who, the perfect companion who will never say no to you and will service your needs and etc. I'm for
This is
human
even
beings.
sicker. Yeah. 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 You're right.
And Natalie, you asked me at the beginning about what sociological or economic or political conditions make it more ripe for
Mhm.
people to be susceptible to cults. And the answer is, whenever order is disrupted, whenever people
Yeah.
have a death of a loved one or a divorce or lose a job or graduate or move to a new city, state, or country, people are going to be more vulnerable to some smiling, friendly person who just wants to share and wants to play volleyball with you. And later you're studying the Bible with them and you find out it's a Korean cult. And one of the biggest vulnerabilities is what happened with me is I thought I was too smart to ever get taken by any con artist, much like I never thought I could be in a cult because that was so obviously only stupid people could fall for a cult. But what I try to convey is I was an extra honor student. I was reading postgraduate level when I was 8 years old, and women got me because they lied and they smiled and they made eye contact. And I was a horny 19-year-old and I just didn't know what I didn't know. And so I tell everybody, be humble. And if something
You never know.
is real, it will stand up to scrutiny. I tell people to have a trust pod in this day and age, which means create a group of friends or
Yeah.
family members that love you and care about you. And if you have any major decision, like you're dating someone new, or you're thinking of going to a workshop somewhere, or you're thinking of paying extraordinary money for a supplement that's going to fix everything, talk to your trust pod and say, what do you think about this? X, Y, or Z. And because we're smarter together. And I even say, if you have a trust pod, you can designate a contrarian. You can say, each week we're going to rotate that role. Your job is to be a naysayer to whatever the other people are sharing. Find what's wrong with it
This is
and
brilliant.
challenge it. Because again, we're stronger together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
100%. Amazing.
So what's the solution? I was trying to get to the Biden administration when they were in power and say you should declare a public health emergency. We're under
Yes. Yeah.
psychological warfare attack. We need to develop inoculation programs that are age appropriate, that have target different populations, whether it's targeting women or Hispanics or blacks or Jews or Christians or whatever. We need really good inoculation programs using former members to share their stories. We need to develop programs to teach clinicians, politicians, media, educators, law enforcement about my influence continuum and bite model and malignant narcissism. And we need to make it okay for people to leave these groups. We need to destigmatize
Hmm.
and create recovery centers, as there are centers for people who realize they're alcoholics and they need support.
Yeah.
We should be funding support centers for people coming out
Mhm.
of the Trump mindset, going, how did
Yeah.
I get here? How did this happen to me? So that people can understand they were following Alex Jones or Joe Rogan or one of these other influencers who is a bad actor,
Yeah. That's
right?
excellent. Excellent.
So it's psychoeducation, if I'm going to sum it up. And that's why when you said we have a podcast, I'm like, yes, I'd be happy to come on and share my expertise because knowledge is power.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If you're a parent and you have kids, you can't afford to be apathetic. Fight for your children's future.
That's what we do.
Yeah. I have a 23-year-old son who's gay, and I don't like these homophobes that are trying to take away gay rights or trans rights. This is evil.
Yeah,
It's
I
It
wrong.
agree.
is.
100%. Dr. Hassan, I'm I'm so flabbergasted. I had so many questions, and finally you answered before I even tried to ask. That was perfect.
Well, I'm grateful to you, Alex, for all that you've done, and you've helped to educate me. And Alatra got on my radar, and I wrote a article on my Substack, and I'm planning to do a further one. Alatra is a Russian cult
Yeah.
that's got a whole bunch of other authoritarian cults, and they're infiltrating the EU. They're infiltrating the UN. They even had a meeting with the Pope in the Vatican. So I'm trying to do whatever I can to warn the Pope. This is not a healthy group. They use words like religious freedom. But what
Hmm.
they mean by religious freedom is the freedom to discriminate and take people's human rights away from them, not religious freedom meaning I can choose to believe or I can choose not to believe.
Yeah.
And I just met with an old journalist colleague friend of mine, Frederick Clarkson, who interviewed me when I first got out of the Moonies. And he said, you know, Steve, the Moonies took your religious freedom away as a Jew by lying to you and saying they weren't religious, that you're an adult and you have a right to choose. And so legitimate religions should tell you up front who they are, what they believe, and what will happen if you commit to joining them. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses go door to door and they say, well, you want to study the Bible, but they don't disclose
They
their
don't. They
version
don't
of
tell
the
you.
Bible is wrong.
Hmm.
But they're lying to people.
Yeah.
Not okay.
I'm almost tempted to take this interview after we make the cut and send it to as many politicians in Czech Republic and European Union as I can, because that was most instructive.
That would actually make it happen, because if you
Mhm.
send it to a politician's office, one of their aides is gonna like push it aside. It's okay, but these are the essential points, right? So, but people don't need 50 years to learn how to do an interview or how to engage people, and a big part of it is storytelling.
Yeah,
And why
100%.
people listen to me largely is because I have a story about being recruited into a cult and becoming a right-wing fascist. So people are like, you got into a cult? How did that
No
happen?
one believes you. What? Yeah.
And so I get to tell my story, and I tell my what happened when I woke up. I was so ashamed and embarrassed and confused and angry as hell. How dare they do this to me?
Yeah.
How dare they?
How dare they? Exactly.
It
Natalie, do
turns
you
out
want?
my government was part of the creation of the Moonies,
Yeah.
and the Moonies were selected and they were used to counter dissidents in South Korea because they had two unsuccessful coups, and the ops some ops person in the CIA said we've got to create a counter brainwashing program, but let's use a proxy group so it doesn't look like we're as bad as North Korea. And so they selected a small little unknown cult, and then they brought the cult to the United States to recruit and
It's
take
funny how the old times still keep haunting us. The Cold War from Nixon to today, it keeps haunting us,
and
even
let's not
in the person of
forget the
Trump.
Nazis. The
Mm.
Nazis have
Yeah.
made a big
Right.
comeback with Donald Trump and Elon
Absolutely.
Musk and these people with their Zig Heils.
But
Not okay.
this would be already another story and another hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
We got
take care. Good luck.
Thank
Let me
Thank you
know
you.
so
when it
much.
comes out. You're
It was
welcome.
so awesome. Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Hassan.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
Yeah. Bye bye.